With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown.
And I am Yolana Weeks.
Our top stories. St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister says rise of global Africa unstoppable.
Premier of Nevis urges residents to pay water bills and avoid meter tampering. Medical doctor warns of high obesity rates locally and globally.
New administration in Guyana to pursue more oil exploration. Electoral Office of Jamaica assures Jamaicans ballot boxes were not tampered with in election. Internationally, Qatar denies White House claims that U.S. informed Doha about Israeli strikes. Now, the details. On September 5th, 2025, the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew, addressed Global Africa Diaspora Day in Algeria. Prime Minister Drew noted that the rise of global Africa is unstoppable. Continuing the narrative of deeper collaboration, the Prime Minister emphasized that Africa and the Caribbean must ensure that unity brings real opportunities, lifts people out of poverty, and secures prosperity for future generations.
Just to take you back a little bit more, and we stand on holy ground here, as I would call it, sacred ground, in Algeria, a country that fought for its liberation and independence from colonization. But if we were to go back to the Caribbean, the diaspora of Africa, in the 18th century, the late 1700s, when ex-slaves or slaves in the person of Toussaint Louverture and his excellent Dessalines defeated a colonial power that was France, declared independence, so it was not given to us. Blood was shed for us to be able to be free people. That spirit of liberation that started right there in one of the richest colonies for European power, that spirit spread throughout the rest of the Caribbean and spread all the way through Africa. We are one people. And as a result of that, Toussaint Louverture, who was then captured later on by Napoleon and sent to France, where he died in prison. But the spirit of liberation had been planted. And even though you would have taken out an individual, you could not have taken out the concept, the idea of true liberation. And right after him came Dessalines, who defeated the French right in the Caribbean. It's a similar history right here. I would also like to extend that in 1945, with the Pan-African Congress that was held in Manchester, and I mentioned it yesterday, I mentioned one name, Kwame Nkrumah, but there were others at that meeting when it was being led by a Caribbean intellectual in the person of George Padmore. There was, of course, His Excellency Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya. There was, of course, His Excellency later on of Malawi. There was Amy Garvey. There were representatives from the United States of America in the person of W.E.B. Du Bois. And I'm saying all of this to show that that Pan-African meeting, which was held in 1945 in Manchester of London, where the concept of decolonization took root so that it should go into action. And it was declared then that Africa and people of African descent must be free. And history speaks the rest.
The Prime Minister stated that given the continent's history, global Africa must not look externally to resolve its challenges, but rather utilize the multilateral resources of the global community connected to the continent for prosperity.
And so in that spirit, this has brought us to why this is relevant today. It is relevant because we have taken it in stages. Stages from fighting against slavery, fighting against post-slavery, fighting against colonization, fighting for independence and liberation. And today, the next chapter in our journey is to fight for economic sovereignty. And so, as I wrap up today, because there are other speakers, I want to make it abundantly clear that what we seek to do in lifting global Africa is really part of a long story. But our story is also connected to humanity, because in the lifting of Africa and its peoples will automatically result in the upliftment of humanity as a whole. We cannot see ourselves as a fragment and separated from humanity. We cannot see ourselves as a part and, of course, ignore the whole. But what we are simply saying is that for humanity to advance and reach that glorious place that we all aspire to reach, that Africa and African people must take their rightful place among the peoples of this world. And so these efforts are tangible efforts to connect all of our people. And as was said by our sister, Mia Moore Motley, that people follow the money. That is true, in the sense that there has to be tangible benefits of what we seek to do. In a sense that this global trade and this reconnection can bring, of course, benefits to our people. Lift our people out of abject poverty. Allow our people to flourish culturally and otherwise, including economically. And that is why it is important that we do what we are doing. I would like to call that as African peoples, that where there are conflict, that we seek to end this conflict. For having conflict and the destruction of life will not advance our cause as global Africa. That there where there are division, that is matched by dialogue, so that through dialogue we can resolve the issues that we have as a continent and as a people. I therefore call that we cannot expect anyone from outside to resolve our issues. We have to be those who would lead to resolve our own issues and challenges.
Dr. Drew concluded his remarks sharing that the seed has been planted for the rise of global Africa, and with various capacities, aptitudes, utterances, and writings, economic sovereignty will be achieved to the benefit of all people in the diaspora. The Prime Minister, the incoming chair of CARICOM, also co-chaired the second Africa CARICOM Summit alongside His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola and chairperson of the African Union. The summit was held at the Nelson Mandela Hall of the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. The summit brought together African and Caribbean leaders to strengthen a shared vision of unity, justice, and development. The first in-person meeting between CARICOM heads of state and government and their counterparts from Africa since the inaugural virtual summit in 2021 comes at a pivotal moment to reinforce historical bonds and explore deeper strategic partnerships. On behalf of CARICOM, Dr. Drew led discussions on culture, education, and health, stressing the urgency of deepening CARICOM Africa collaboration across shared priorities including reparations, global financial reform, climate action, education, health, trade, and cultural exchange.
The Premier of Nevis, Mark Brantley, issued a public notice on behalf of the Nevis Water Department at his press conference on August 28, 2025, urging residents of Nevis to settle their outstanding water bills promptly to avoid disconnection. The notice was given as the department prepared to conduct a series of disconnections targeting customers with long-standing arrears. The Water Department was willing to work with customers facing financial difficulties to create manageable payment plans. Some have not been upholding their end of the bargain and are also subject to disconnection.
The Water Department has asked me to tell the public that they're carrying out disconnections in the coming weeks for customers who are in arrears for more than 3 months. You see what a long time customers are being given? 3 months. If you are in arrears for more than 3 months, then you will be disconnected. This includes customers who have payment plans but are not adhering to them. Customers, please are urged to ensure that their monthly payments are made promptly to avoid disconnection.
Brantley also made a strong appeal for residents not to tamper with water meters, describing such actions as illegal and damaging to water infrastructure. He warned that anyone caught engaging in meter tampering would face hefty fines.
And also you're reminded not to tamper with water meters when disconnected. Please, tampering with water meters draws hefty fines of between $1,800 if you tamper with it to $2,200, which is the cost of replacing it.
In the statement, the Premier emphasized that water is a vital resource and remains one of the cheapest commodities available to residents. Brantley encouraged customers to take advantage of the affordable rates by staying up to date with their payments, noting that the continued provision of quality water service depends on the community's collective responsibility to pay their bills.
So we are just encouraging our people to be responsible and do the right thing. Water is probably the cheapest commodity that we have on the island of Nevis. And sometimes I see people come to me lamenting that they have a bill for $4,000 and $5,000. If you have a $5,000 water bill, you have not paid for over a year. That's the reality. And so I encourage our people, just please do the right thing. Pay your water bill. Water is life, and we need to be able to ensure that we can continue to provide water to all of the people of Nevis.
The disconnection of water services for accounts that are significantly in arrears will commence on Wednesday, September 17 to Tuesday, September 30, 2025. Therefore, all outstanding balances must be settled by Friday, September 12, 2025. Residents were reminded that once their water service is disconnected, a reconnection fee of $150 will apply. This fee must be paid in full, along with any outstanding arrears, before water can be restored. Reconnections will be executed within 24 hours of payment, but will not be available between 3 p.m. on Fridays and 8 a.m. on Mondays. A local medical doctor/surgeon, Dr. Natalie Osborne, raised concerns about the high levels of obesity in St. Kitts and Nevis, warning that it poses a serious threat to public health. She disclosed that 46.6% of the Federation's adult population is obese. Presenting on Daily Dose on Island Tea on September 2, 2025, the doctor highlighted that obesity has been steadily rising globally, affecting both adults and children.
The global adult overweight percentage in 2022 was 43%. And the global adult obesity is 16%. Those are data from 2022. Overweight children, less than 5 years old, there are about 35 to 37 million children worldwide. And children and adolescents that are overweight is about 390 million, with 160 million who are obese. And all this is data from 2022. And in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have approximately 46.6% adults who are with obesity. And it's projected by 2035, about 50% of the world population would be overweight, and about 2 billion would be obese.
Wow.
So it is a pandemic of obesity that we have here.
So what is obesity?
Yeah, we talk about obesity all the time, and sometimes it was always just the stigma of saying, "Oh, you're just fat, you need to take care of it," and so. But we know that.
Dr. Osborne explained that multiple factors contribute to obesity, including poor dietary habits, the overconsumption of processed foods and sugary drinks, eating late at night, lack of physical activity, which includes persons who are unable to walk or move around, and others who may be working longer hours and are too tired to exercise. Medications such as antidepressants and steroids, and certain medications to treat hypertension and diabetes. Genetics, lack of sleep, and diseases such as polycystic ovarian disease, thyroid disease, and Cushing disease. This growing health crisis, the doctor stressed, is not just about appearance, but can lead to a range of life-threatening complications.
So we know that obesity is associated with lots of complications, okay? And one of the biggest one is cardiovascular health. When you talk about cardiovascular, we're talking about the heart and the blood vessels associated with it. So we know that can increase things like coronary heart disease, where the blood vessels that supply the heart becomes damaged, becomes blocked. We're talking about things like heart attack, where you're not getting enough blood supply to a section of the heart and that tissue dies off. We're talking about heart failure. So obesity contributes to a lot of that. We're talking about fatty liver diseases. Deposited, lots of extra fat is deposited in the liver. That can lead to inability for your liver to function. Remember, we talked about liver failure some time ago. That's a risk factor. We talk about things like developing gallstones when you have high cholesterols and stuff. Kidney disease. Of course, diabetes type 2, we know that our community is plagued with diabetes. And these are some of the things that we know that. So we know statistically that obesity increases your risk of a premature death.
The doctor warned that excess body fat can put a strain on vital organs and increase the risk of chronic diseases such as type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. Obesity causes sleep apnea and is also closely linked to certain cancers, stroke, and liver problems. According to Osborne, even moderate weight gain can raise a person's chances of developing these conditions if left unaddressed. She further pointed out that obesity is linked to memory loss, infertility and pregnancy complications, and also affects mental health, often leading to low self-esteem, anxiety, and depression. Joint and bone problems were also highlighted as a major concern. The excess weight puts added pressure on the knees, hips, and back, increasing the risk of arthritis and mobility issues. Osborne suggested a person have at least 350 minutes of exercise per week, engage in 3 45-minute walks weekly, and create a diet plan. The doctor further encouraged individuals and families to make healthy choices together, especially when it pertains to meals and activities.
In regional news, new administration in Guyana to pursue more oil exploration, News Source Guyana reports.
With the Sunday morning sun coming down, President Irfan Ali was sworn in as president for a second term yesterday by the acting chancellor of the judiciary, Justice Roxanne George. At State House, moments after taking the oath of office, the president said the People's Progressive Party's civic administration will pursue new exploration under a stronger production sharing agreement for the oil sector, even as it works to strengthen the traditional sectors and diversify the country's economy through the advancement of new and emerging sectors.
In the next 5 years, we'll convert ambition into action and action into transformation. We will not speak in half measures. We will not hesitate. We will deliver. Yes, our oil and gas sector will continue to grow, expanding production and revenue for our people. But why stop there? We'll press forward with new exploration under a stronger production sharing agreement, ensuring that the benefits are greater, the gains are wider, and the wealth is truly for the people.
In 2024, the government had finalized its new model production sharing agreement. However, despite repeated announcements that the new PSAs would be signed with the companies that had participated in the 2022 bidding round, no agreement was signed. Noting that Guyana will not be a one-sector nation, the president said his administration will continue to build a diversified economy that will generate jobs, raise income, and secure prosperity. As part of its commitment to economic diversification, the new Ali administration intends to strengthen the traditional pillars of the economy, mining, agriculture, fisheries, and forestry, to ensure that they continue to provide jobs, wealth, and stability for Guyanese. President Ali said his administration will also create new growth poles that drive the economy through world-class tourism, a thriving blue economy, competitive manufacturing, cutting-edge information and communications technology, and dynamic knowledge-based industries.
Guyana's economic future depends not only on the ambitions and policies of government, but also on the private sector. A private sector ready to drive wealth and job creation. Success will come when businesses pursue growth while ensuring fairness to their workers, upholding social responsibility, and contributing to the broader well-being of our society. It is this partnership between government and a responsible, forward-looking private sector that will propel shared prosperity.
He also assured that his administration will put the infrastructure in place to advance the work of the private sector and to remove the red tape that often act as a hindrance to its growth. He said the government intends to invest boldly in the infrastructure sector that underpins growth, creates jobs, and unlocks opportunities for citizens.
In the next 6 weeks, planning and preparation begin for a suite of major projects. a brand new Berbice River Bridge, a bridge across the Quarantine River with Suriname, a second gas-to-shore plant in Region 6, the establishment of an economic zone in Berbice, the construction of a deep-water harbor, the expansion of the Damrar Harbor, the building of our national digital backbone through Digital Guyana Project, and fertilizer and natural gas plants that will make Guyana an industrial powerhouse in the region. The next 6 weeks will see these projects advancing on track.
The State House ceremony was open to the public and it was followed by a Sunday brunch and concert at the Kingston Seawall.
The Electoral Office of Jamaica assures Jamaicans ballot boxes were not tampered with in election. Television Jamaica has that report.
The Electoral Office of Jamaica has rejected claims in a viral social media post that over 17,000 spoiled ballots were recorded in the St. Andrew West Central constituency. Prime Minister-elect Dr. Andrew Holness defeated the PNP's Paul Buchanan in the constituency by over 2,000 votes. However, his win has come under increased scrutiny as Mr. Buchanan was leading hours into the preliminary counting Wednesday night. But the EOJ has maintained that there was no tampering of the ballot boxes. The picture that is being circulated on social media. It brings into sharp focus the St. Andrew West Central constituency, stating that there were over 17,000 spoiled ballots during the preliminary count. The picture also listed the Electoral Office of Jamaica as the source of the information. But on Sunday, the EOJ responded in a press release describing the picture as fake and urging the public to desist from spreading false information. It said the EOJ is aware of public utterances and graphic posts on social media perpetuating false information about the transportation of ballot boxes and the counting of ballots and claiming to be from EOJ sources. These include unfounded claims of missing and uncounted ballot boxes, as well as a grossly inaccurate number of spoiled ballots in one constituency. The EOJ is also reminding the public that the preliminary counting of ballots took place in the presence of indoor agents representing at least 2 candidates or political parties, and in some cases in the presence of election observers. The organization also stressed that ballot boxes were strictly monitored by indoor agents and escorted by the police to the counting centers. The EOJ is stating clearly that all 7,294 general election ballot boxes and all 109 local government by-election boxes have been accounted for. Meanwhile, the EOJ said up to midday on September 7, the final count for the September 3 general election was completed in 61 constituencies. The counting of ballots for the other 2 constituencies continues with returning officers in the presence of the candidates and/or their representatives.
We now bring you these international reports.
A member of Hamas's political bureau told Al Jazeera earlier that the group was meeting at the time of the attack with, quote, a positive outlook on the American ceasefire proposal. He also said that the group holds the American administration responsible for the attack. Now, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has been speaking in her regular press briefing, and she's been asked about this Israeli strike on Doha. She said the Israeli strike was, quote, unfortunate, and that Qatar had advance warning of the attack.
The Trump administration was notified by the United States military that as Israel was attacking Hamas, which very unfortunately was located in a section of Doha, the capital of Qatar. Unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. However, eliminating Hamas, who have profited off the misery of those living in Gaza, is a worthy goal. President Trump immediately directed Special Envoy Witkoff to inform the Qataris of the impending attack, which he did. The president views Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the United States and feels very badly about the location of this attack. President Trump wants all of the hostages in Gaza and the bodies of the dead released, and this war to end now. President Trump also spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu after the attack. The Prime Minister told President Trump that he wants to make peace, and quickly. President Trump believes this unfortunate incident could serve as an opportunity for peace. The president also spoke to the Emir and Prime Minister of Qatar and thanked them for their support and friendship to our country. He assured them that such a thing will not happen again on their soil.
Qatar's foreign ministry spokesperson has addressed what you heard there from the White House press spokesperson, that the country was informed of that Israeli attack on Doha beforehand. Qatar is saying that is false. Charles Stratford from the Corniche in Doha for us again. So, Charles, Qatar now directly contradicting what the White House said.
That's right. That statement from the Foreign Ministry literally dropping a couple of minutes ago. I'll read out exactly what it says. It says that the statements being circulated about Qatar being informed in advance of the attack are baseless. The statement goes on to say that the communication received from one of the American officials happened during the sound of the explosions. This obviously comes on the back of that statement made by the White House earlier, which said that Steve Witkoff, the US Special Envoy, was told to inform the Qataris of the impending attack. So Qatar very keen to point out that seemingly that advance warning that Witkoff was told to give the Qataris was nowhere near on time. The Qataris saying that they received it as the attack itself was happening.
Charles, can you remind our viewers, can you give us some context here on U.S.-Qatar relations? Because they are very close allies. Donald Trump was here 3 months ago.
That's right. Very close relations and relations that were established a long time ago. We know that the U.S. has its largest airbase here in Qatar. Trump has always been very generous and previous administrations very generous in their comments about the Qataris. And we know how pivotal the Qataris have been in trying to mediate an end to this war. The White House only this evening or this afternoon in Washington saying that this attack did not advance Israel or US goals. It said that hitting Hamas is a worthy goal, but it said that the US feels badly about the location of the attack. And we know now that Trump has subsequently spoken to Qatar's leader following that attack. But yeah, the relationship between the US has for decades between the US and Qatar been very strong indeed. And it seems as if, certainly there seems to be an attempt by both the US and the Qataris to try and calm the situation down with respect to any major diplomatic fallout that could occur following these attacks between the US and Qatar. But very telling now that the Qataris have said that they didn't receive any warning in advance of this attack. The only warning that they received, according to the Foreign Ministry, was whilst those attacks were actually happening.
Charles Stratford reporting from Doha. Thank you very much, Charles. Al Jazeera's White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett joins us. Kimberly, it's very important that we speak to you at this point because the U.S. is a very important part of this puzzle, and Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, has just been fielding questions about this, about what the U.S. knew, when they knew it, and what they did subsequently. So fill us in on everything that you've learned because you were sitting in on that White House press briefing.
Yeah, well, the White House is denying, despite some media reports, that the U.S. President Donald Trump in fact greenlit or approved or even had advanced knowledge of the Israeli strike that amounted to, we believe, about 12 strikes inside of Doha, Qatar. In fact, what she's saying is that she was notified, or rather the U.S. president was notified by the United States military that an attack was ongoing. Not that it was imminent, but that it was already taking place. And that is when the U.S. president reportedly, according to the White House press secretary, notified the special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, who then in turn notified the Qataris that this was taking place. I'm sure they also knew from within, from their own security service. But the bottom line is that the White House has been very contrite about what has occurred given the strong relationship that exists between the United States and Qatar. The White House press secretary saying that this is a sovereign nation, speaking about Qatar, and that it's a close ally working to broker peace. And the strikes by the Israelis do not advance either Israeli interests or American interests. Now, it's important to note that there was a follow-up question, Cyril, that was whether or not the Israelis had informed the U.S. military in advance of this strike. And the White House press secretary would not answer that question, only saying that the president himself, the commander-in-chief, heads the military, that he was notified while it was ongoing. One other thing that we should point out is that as you've been talking about the reactions that have been coming from within Qatar, the Qatari embassy to the United States has also been notifying members of Congress and saying that it is acknowledged within the Qatari government that despite conflicting media accounts, we are confident that this was a unilateral military strike conducted by Israeli forces without advance consultation of the United States. So this is something that is being echoed and reinforced through diplomatic channels. We should also point out, though, that there are already members of Congress, including some prominent Democrats, who are condemning what Israel has done, including a congresswoman from Minnesota, Betty McCallum, who has said that she condemns this unprovoked attack and that Netanyahu's government is a destabilizing force in the Middle East as a result of these actions.
Kimberly, Donald Trump, as we pointed out with our correspondent in Doha, Donald Trump was here a few months ago. He was standing by the emir and he made a big show of how much he loves this guy. Those were his words. And he's also, of course, a very staunch ally of Israel. Is there, based on your sources, is there at the White House or the State Department, is there a realization that in a moment like this, like today, those two things may not be compatible?
If there is, it's not being voiced publicly. But if you do look at the nuanced language by the White House press secretary, it's very clear that there is concern about damaging the relationship with Qatar, not just because the emir and the U.S. president get along, but as we've been talking, there's a U.S. airbase, Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. There is also a business relationship to the tune of $1.7 trillion of investments that have been made in the United States by the Qataris. There is an ongoing back and forth that is of grave concern of being jeopardized. Add to that, the Qataris have been instrumental on the diplomatic side in terms of not just working as a mediator with Hamas, but also in other global conflicts. Doha has been on the world stage for more than a decade in that capacity. And the United States is keenly aware that it needs the support of the Qataris and that relationship with the Qataris to move and advance some of their own interests in the region forward. So the White House, again, parsing its language, saying that they are unhappy with the location of the Israeli attack, but not the ultimate goal, it says, in terms of eliminating Hamas.
At camp in western Sudan, the few who could pay to escape the besieged city of Al-Fashir describe constant shelling and negotiating violence at checkpoints. Sudan's paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, have tightened their siege around the city, the last holdout of the Sudanese army in the Darfur region. 2.5 years of war has created what the United Nations calls the world's worst humanitarian crisis in Sudan. People inside Al-Fashir have resorted to eating animal feed, and prices have soared even for that. That's according to more than a dozen people Reuters spoke to at Ad-Dabba camp in an area under army control. Ahmed Haj Ali and his family left the city last week. As well as being dangerous, it cost him about $1,600, when few have any money at all. Evacuations have become a side business for RSF members, as has smuggling food.
Traveling to the closest safe area is so costly. One might have a whole family with children. It is very difficult. One can walk on foot for long distances, but you will also need money. That's why people are forced to stay there, and there are still some people who remain there. We left them behind. We left Al-Fashir on Friday because of the situation in the city. the difficult conditions, and the living standards, with shelling, the humiliation, and many other things.
Earlier this week, a UN mission found that the RSF had committed crimes against humanity in Al-Fashir. That's on top of atrocities both the RSF and the Sudanese army have committed, the mission said in a report. Dara Salam Hamid says she and her family were searched aggressively by RSF soldiers when they finally decided to leave.
While we were on the road, we suffered from these people, real suffering. They robbed us and took my phone. They searched us. There is no power nor strength but from God in front of these people.
Al-Fashir has become the main front line of the war, as the RSF seeks to solidify its hold on Darfur as the base for a parallel government. The leaders of that government were sworn in last month, and on Monday they began appointing ministers.
Now, after 14 years of construction, Ethiopia has officially inaugurated a controversial mega dam built over the River Nile. The ceremony was broadcast live on TV. Africa's largest hydroelectric project has a capacity to produce more than 5,000 megawatts of power. The government in Addis Ababa says the project on the Blue Nile will provide electricity to millions of people across the region, not just in Ethiopia. The dam will be Africa's largest hydroelectric plant, but the dam has also been at the centre of a diplomatic row between Sudan and Egypt, who both fear their essential water supplies could be affected. Kalkidan Yibaldal reports from Addis Ababa.
Ethiopia's capital and biggest city, Addis Ababa, is full of excitement as a $4 billion mega dam over the Blue Nile reaches the finish line after 14 years. For a country scarred by a devastating civil war that ended just 3 years ago and continues to face unrest, the project, officially known as the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, generates a rare sense of unity for the majority of the people. And tens of millions across the country's rural villages and remote towns are hoping they will see the benefit. One villager, Getenesh, lives in a Lamura village less than 10 kilometers outside Hawassa, a major city in southern Ethiopia. Her household, like many others in her village, does not have access to electricity. They use kerosene-powered lamps for light and firewood for cooking. It's been very tough, especially for her 3 children.
When we run out of fuel, we might spend nights in darkness. Sometimes we use firewood as a source of light. Sometimes we can't even have enough wood.
For more than a decade, her husband, Germesa, who is a farmer and a part-time carpenter, has been contributing to the national fundraising campaign for the construction of the dam from his monthly income. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been collected from the public through donations and the sale of government-issued bonds. Getenesh and Germesa are now hoping to have access to electricity. The dam began generating power to a small extent 3 years ago, and it's expected to operate with full capacity soon. Power generated from the hydroelectric plant is expected to feed into the national grid. But Ethiopia still needs to expand its networks to reach areas without electricity. That will be the next step.
For 54% of our people, they have access to electricity.
They do have access?
They do have access. Yeah. So we can take 46% is in deficit. That is what we want to reduce now in the coming 5 years. Our intention is by 2030, at least more than 90% of our nation should get access to electricity. That is how we are working upon that.
Besides providing households with electricity, Ethiopia aims to become an economic powerhouse in the Horn of Africa region, for which generating massive amounts of power could be important. The hydropower project is also expected to boost electricity exports to regional neighbors, but it has created issues for countries downstream. Over the years, there have been several rounds of talks among Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt to address issues raised around the building of this hydroelectric dam. However, none of these efforts have been successful, and a binding agreement has not been signed. Accusations continue to be traded, and relations remain tense. Sudan and Egypt fear the dam could affect water levels on the Nile, particularly in times of drought, something Ethiopia denies. In a recent joint statement, the two countries said the dam will continue to create a threat to their water supplies. Officials in Addis Ababa say the costs of the construction were covered by the government and contributions from the public. Now, the country is set to generate a massive source of income in addition to providing power to millions of its citizens. Kalkidani Beltal, BBC News, Southern Ethiopia.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were:
St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister says rise of global Africa unstoppable.
Premier of Nevis urges residents to pay water bills and avoid meter tampering. Medical doctor warns of high obesity rates locally and globally.
New administration in Guyana to pursue more oil exploration. Electoral Office of Jamaica assures Jamaicans ballot boxes were not tampered with in election. Internationally, Qatar denies White House claims that U.S. informed Doha about Israeli strikes.
Thank you for listening.